Welcome to Cardinals Cover 2 with Craig Grialou and Mike Jurecki. Cardinals Cover 2 is brought to you by Arizona Cardinals Podcasts. Visit azcardinals.com/podcasts. From the Dignity Health Arizona Cardinals Training Center, here's Craig Grialou and Mike Jurecki.
Oh, it is good to be back home and back in studio. 5 days in Indianapolis for the 2019 Scouting Combine. 3 shows we did. Can't thank everyone enough for all of their help. And by the way, I left 2 people out at the end of Friday's show that I did not thank and need to thank, because if it wasn't for them, we would not have talked with Steve Keim or Cliff Kingsbury, and that is Mark Dalton and Chris Melvin. But apparently, MJ, you were telling me we got out of Indy just in time.
Yeah, I mean, earlier in the week they said it was going to snow on Saturday evening, and we had a 6 o'clock flight because we wanted
I was
to be
paying
there.
attention.
I know, and initially you get a text message that the flight's going to be a little bit later, right? 6:45. We're supposed to leave at 6:15 or 6:30. Now I didn't follow up because we were gonzo.
Oh yeah.
Once we were in the
Doesn't
air,
matter.
It's in the rearview mirror. And I was talking to Jesse today, and he said that maybe 8 or 9 inches of snow, possibly early Sunday or Monday, Sunday morning, going into Monday. So we escaped. Otherwise, we were stuck in Indy.
Which wouldn't have been too bad. But, yeah, it was because the defensive backs completed their combine.
And that's what usually
today.
happens. You were on Radio Row. Once Saturday came there.
It was basically a ghost town.
It was ghost town. And obviously the teams and owners and general managers and coaches, they're going to be there until today.
Yeah. By the way, we talked about it on Wednesday's show about the number of people that were on our flight going to Indianapolis. Well, coming back to Phoenix, we had more famous people, which is always good because you're on good footing when you've got famous people on your flight. Well, we had Kurt Warner and Ken Wisenhunt on our flight.
And I noticed they both were sitting in first class.
Yes. And we just walked by him and said hello and keep walking.
Yeah, I got a chance to talk to Wiz. I talked to him before our flight, and then we were waiting at the baggage claim. And I'm like, you're in first class. Well, why are you checking a bag? And I got a chance to talk to him as we were waiting for our bags. Tom Clements was on our flight, Cardinals passing coordinator.
And you know who else was on our flight? Darren Urban and Kyle Odegard were on our flight, too.
Right. Famous
people.
And then it looks like we had a lot of tight ends on our flight. Did you notice that?
Yeah, there were a handful of players. Couldn't quite put names to
they
faces.
They still wearing their number and the
it just didn't have a roster,
but
though.
we had a few tight ends and wide receivers on our flights, and at that point I was ready to go to sleep.
It was a lot of fun all the way through, and because of everything we were to do last week, we'll continue our combine coverage over the next couple of weeks, and of course leading into the NFL draft. We've got a number of interviews that we did not make air, but certainly want to get to you, and you'll hear those this week and again as we kind of ramp up. And don't forget, free agency is right around the corner as well. 1 week from today, free agency begins, at least the legal tampering as they call it, and then March 13th at 2 p.m. the league year begins, and that is the start of free agency, when you can actually make things official, and of course trades become official as well.
So 1 week from today.
Yes.
And then official announcements, as you mentioned, March 13th, which is next Wednesday. You know what else is March 13th?
I believe it's a pro day for somebody.
It's the Oklahoma Sooners Pro Day.
I wonder if anyone else on that field outside of quarterback Kyler Murray, is anyone going to be paying attention? Now, I know they've got some talent, including some talented wide receivers, but it's all about Kyler Murray.
Now, he did meet with 10 teams, and Detroit and Seattle met with them.
Yeah, I saw that note from Peter King, and we'll get into that as well.
Yeah, exactly. Interesting. And that's just to do your due diligence, because 3 or 4 years from now, we'll see where he's at. So some teams obviously aren't going to draft him, but he did meet with at least 10 teams.
Yeah. With that, let's take off here on this Monday, tell you what's ahead on the show. Well, yeah, we'll talk Kyler Murray, Josh Rosen, more and more. Believe the Cardinals will draft Murray with the first overall pick, unless, of course, they don't. Free agency begins.
You mean it's not a done deal?
Next week. In fact, 1 week from today, Kyle Odegard of azcardinals.com joins us here in studio to talk both the Combine and free agency. And, of course, your questions via social media using the hashtag CardsCover2, hashtag CardsCover2. But first, the news of the day, and yes, it is all over. The 2019 scouting combine has come and gone. The defensive backs were the last position group to run through the on-field testing. And some news earlier this morning, the fastest 40 time clocked, and it was done by Ole Miss safety Zedrick Woods, 4.29 seconds. Now, not an overall record. The overall record is 4.22, but 4.29, that is fast.
Yeah, and anytime you get to that Monday of the NFL Combine, you usually see running backs, receivers, and then defensive backs. In this case, we'll go safety and corner. We saw a 4.31, we saw a 4.38, but this is the top time. But, one thing that you talked about in Greedy Williams, he put up a good 40 time today, and I think he's going to be a top 10 pick, but not to the Arizona Cardinals.
We'll wait and see on that. Depends on where they're
You're still
drafting.
banging that drum?
Best available.
Well, if you want to go there, I can give you 3 other names, but we'll do that a little bit later.
Now, since our last show on Friday, the defensive draft prospects met the media in Indianapolis, and for the purpose of this show for today, we want to focus on 3 of those players and consider the top 3 players, not at their position, just the top 3 overall defensive players, and those 3 would be Nick Bosa, Josh Allen, and Quinnen Williams. All 3 would look good in a Cardinals uniform. Both of those whom many consider to be head and shoulders above the rest. And, when he addressed the media, he is eyeing that number 1 overall pick.
It's a dream come true. Arizona's at number 1 right now. Coach Bill Davis from Ohio State is the linebacker coach over there, who's obviously at Ohio State with me. So, that would just mean so much to me to be thought of as the best player in the draft. I wouldn't say anything about Kyler. I would just say that I'm somebody who loves the game more than anybody. I'm going to come in and I'm going to work every day, every practice, trying to find new things to better myself. So if you do draft me, then you'll have somebody who's going to improve throughout my entire career. The toughest part is just the beginning. It's such a unique injury in that it's literally the muscle you use to breathe, to cough, to go to the bathroom. It's literally, it's your core muscle. So it's something different than I've dealt with before. It's really gradual, small steps, so it's kind of frustrating. But once you get through it, I'm feeling better than I've ever felt right now. So.
And that's key right there when he talks about how he's feeling. And, of course, he's referencing the core muscle injury that he suffered that basically almost cost him all of last season, had to have surgery. But he was feeling good enough to at least go through the entire combine process, and that's all the on-field drills. And I don't know, he didn't have to do that. He could have waited for his pro day, but he felt, as did a lot of players out in Indianapolis, feel that he needed to show because I'm sure there's a lot of people questioning, hey, we haven't seen you since early September, and we know what of a freak athlete you are and your family. And it was good for me because it does tell you what kind of a character person he is when he says, when you've got all that hype, all that attention, yet you're still going out and putting yourself amongst your peers to see how well you test against the guy next to you.
Well, obviously we don't get the medical reports or the character stuff, but for the most part, I think it was important for him to be out there because, you can pop in the tape, and when he was healthy, he's very productive. But, according to his father, he's 100%. He's been 100% probably for the last few weeks, if not maybe the last month. But I think he had a workout just to show that he's not hiding anything. If you want to be the first pick in the draft, and I know Murray, I think quarterbacks are different. They don't like throwing to receivers they're not familiar with. We know in their pro day it's scripted. He's going to be throwing to receivers. I don't know if one ball will hit the ground in his pro day, and he's going to run in his pro day. He's probably going to run a 4.33. But for Bosa, because of the injury, and if you want to be the top choice, now again, teams have the medical report, and I was told there was no red flags when it came to Bosa, Quinnen Williams, or Kyle Murray during the interviews. Again, it was only 15 minutes, and now we'll get into the other part of it. But for the most part, I think it was important that he went out there and showed. You can talk about it, but now he went out there. And to me, just based on what he did, I think he actually has separated himself from Josh Allen. I really do.
Okay, we'll get into Allen in a moment. By the way, Bosa did mention that the Cardinals would be making, quote, a big mistake, unquote, if they did not draft him number one. Now, the other edge rusher that a lot of people are pointing to, and MJ just brought it up, that is Josh Allen, the linebacker out of Kentucky. 17 sacks last year as a senior. Now, he only had 14 and a half sacks combined his first 3 years at Kentucky. But here is a gentleman, a young man who is certainly not lacking confidence.
I think I'm the best player in this draft. But if a team doesn't see that, I believe that. I feel like every other guy here should believe that, but I believe that. And if a team doesn't believe that, then I'll see them during the season. I think I'm one of the only guys that really dropped into coverage half the season as well. So I also pass rush, but also dropped in coverage as well. So I think that separates myself from a lot of guys here. I have to say Khalil Mack and Von Miller. I say that too because I believe those two are the best, at the positions. And I feel like I'm the best, so, might as well compare myself with the best. And I feel like my game symbolizes both of theirs. And
that's a heck of a comparison to make for yourself when you talk about Khalil Mack, who was the 5th overall pick in 2013, Von Miller 2nd overall in 2011. But what he did say there earlier, talking about dropping in coverage, that is the one thing that does separate him from some of those edge rushers, because as a linebacker, he is got the experience to drop back, as opposed to when you got your hand in the dirt as a defensive end. And if you stay at a defensive end position in the NFL, or in the case, and we've already heard Bill Davis talk about it here with the Cardinals, that and Vance Joseph, that it's an easy transition for those defensive ends in college to be outside linebackers at the NFL level, yet at the same time you're asking them partly to do something they're not too familiar with. Allen, though, does have that experience.
Yeah, and listen, I still think he's going to be drafted, a high pick. I don't think he's dropping. I think he had a good combine. I wish I had $1 for every player that told us they're the best player in the draft.
And to a certain extent, you want to hear that.
I can appreciate the confidence, but we hear this over and over. And again, they can't dictate where they're going to go. And just because if he drops to number 4, 5, or 6 doesn't mean he's not going to be a great player. It's just that I just think Bosa separated himself. But as you pointed out, teams are looking for different things. You got to drop back into coverage. To me, they're both quality players.
Absolutely.
So I don't want to minimize one or the other. I just think Bosa, to me, he separated himself just in his drills, his first 10 yards and some of the different drills. I don't care about his 40 time, lifting weights and stuff like that. So, but again, it's, do you prefer a guy that can just rush the passer? You want a guy that can go from sideline to sideline? Both of these guys are 3-down players, though. They're not going to come off the field.
And the other one on that defensive line is an interior lineman, Quinnen Williams, a tackle out of Alabama. He had a very good performance at the Combine. More on that in a moment. But he was asked what it might mean to be the number 1 overall pick.
It'll mean a lot of things, but I know going number 1 doesn't mean nothing for real. Like guys like 5 stars in high school, it's the same thing. Like going to Alabama, you can be a 5-star on the sideline. So I know being the number 1 draft pick, you can go to NFL. If you don't work, you're going to be on the sideline. So, and I want to play. Like, I had a great year last year, and I want to keep that going and show the world like it just wasn't a burst-out year. Like, I'm a really good football player, and I can really play this game. We have a great class of defensive linemen just coming in. I'm just blessed to be a part of this defensive line class. But what sets me apart is my IQ level of football. Like, I feel like I have the best IQ level of football. I feel like I can break down film like a quarterback and watch different tendencies and things like that. So,
a very humble young man. Darren Urban has a story up right now on azcardinals.com about Quinnen Williams, but the one thing that everyone was talking about over the weekend is just how fast he was during his 40 time. And here's someone who checks in at over 300 pounds, yet he ran a 4.83, the fastest for a 300-plus pound defensive lineman since 2012. And if you just look at what he did the first 10 yards, and that's what a lot of teams will look at, because I don't care if Williams is running a 4.83 on his 40, because he's not going to be asked to run down a wide receiver or a running back.
But it shows his athleticism.
Yeah, but it's those first 10 yards, and he had a 1.67 split those first 10 yards, and that shows you how quick he is as far as his ability to get off the line of scrimmage once that ball is snapped.
Now, if he was a pass rusher, he'd be in the conversation. I still think he's in the conversation to be a top pick.
And in most years, he very well might be head and shoulders above everyone else.
Right, and we've seen, defensive tackles, you look at Dan Williams a few years ago, a long time ago when Cincinnati drafted him. Myles Garrett was more of an outside guy, but I'm saying if he was a legitimate pass rusher, but he's a 3-technique guy, he's a plug-and-play guy, he is going to be a high pick, and I thought he had an unbelievable combine along with some of the other guys we mentioned. If you're the Cardinals sitting there with the first pick in the draft, there's really 3 options. I'm sure there's 10 options, but if you really look at it, obviously Murray's attractive just because it fits Kingsbury's offense, and then you throw in Bosa, rush the passer, opposite a guy like Chandler Jones, and then you throw in Quentin Williams. You can't go wrong with any of those 3 guys. If to me those are the top. Again, there's great players in this draft, but you're talking about the first overall pick. You can't go wrong with any 3 of those guys.
Yeah, and Williams' quickness, for those that might have missed it, the NFL Network did something that I thought was tremendous. They call this the simulcast, where they go back and kind of show you what past players did during their 40 times and kind of compare it to what this current group did. And with Williams, just how fast he was able to run the 40, they compared his times to both Jimmy Garoppolo and Josh Rosen's 40 times, and it's not even close. For those watching us here right now, you can see well ahead Williams in front of Rosen, in front of Garoppolo. Rosen a 4.92, Garoppolo a 4.97.
And how much does Williams weigh?
303 pounds he checked in at Indianapolis.
Well, again, when it comes to the quarterback, I know that we're showing us, obviously guys are much lighter and play different positions, but, I don't need my quarterback to run 40 yards like that. But it just goes to show you, this guy, he's a different animal. He's a monster.
Well, he's athletic, and that is something, when you get that much weight on your body, how do you respond? Can you move side to side? Can you move frontwards, backwards? Not just normal speed, but quickness, because that's all it is in the NFL. How quickly, especially on the defensive line, can you get to that quarterback?
Well, we talk about Aaron Donald. He wasn't the first pick in the draft. He went 13th overall. If you had to do the draft all over again, he'd probably be the first pick. But the way they're able to knife through there, their acceleration, their get-off, they can split a double team. Geno Atkins. I would throw in there Fletcher Cox. I think Williams is very similar to those guys. I'm not putting him in Aaron Donald. I know Ed Oliver's been some comparisons. He may play linebacker at the next level, could play D-line, but I would put him in that same conversation. We need to see it, but he has those traits. Again, I'm not comparing him, but more of a Fletcher Cox, Geno Atkins, who've been studs in the NFL for a long, long time.
Yeah, so Bosa, Allen, and Williams, those top 3 defensive players, basically going into Indianapolis and coming out of Indianapolis as well. As we broadcast here on this Monday afternoon from the Dignity Health Arizona Cardinals Training Center, and doing so in our Bose QC35s here on this Monday afternoon. While we've got your attention on those 3 key defensive players, how about we talk about Nick Bosa and kind of get to know that Ohio State defensive end just a little bit more.
My dad was drafted first round in '87 to the Miami Dolphins, played defensive end. My uncle, the year after, Eric Kummerow, also played defensive end for the Dolphins. And then my brother, Joey Bosa, was drafted to the LA Chargers, and he also plays defensive end, so runs in the family. Nick Bosa, defensive end, the Ohio State. I would describe my style of play as relentless and fast.
Bosa hits him and drops him.
I have good speed, good power. I change it up pretty well. Keep the tackles guessing.
Bosa with pressure again, and he's got it.
My love for the game separates me. I think I'm going to have a relentless mindset when it comes to just getting better every day in practice. I'm just looking forward to putting on an NFL jersey and running out of the tunnel and making a name for myself.
The headline on azcardinals.com over the weekend, Nick Bosa could be too good to pass up. And I see what you did there, Kyle Odegard of azcardinals.com, as he joins us here on Cards Cover 2. Too good to pass up, as he's a pass rusher.
You got it.
Very well done. See, I'm a little bit smarter than everyone thinks I am, but I liked it.
That's the big question. We can't escape this Kyler Murray talk.
Wait, I thought you were about ready to rip me. I thought you.
No.
Oh,
never.
okay.
I would never do that.
All right.
But that's the big question: Bosa or Kyler Murray, and then obviously you guys are talking about Quinnen Williams. Is Josh Allen in that mix? we have so long to go and so much to decipher, and it's good you guys are on 3 days a week because you have plenty of content.
Yeah, and
you can do it daily if you want.
When they approach us, they're like, this isn't just during the season. You guys are going to do this in the off season. And we're thinking, all right, by July we'll be asking your favorite color. And would you trade a ham sandwich for a peanut butter and jelly sandwich?
365.
Not that you need to tell me why it's your favorite color, but anyways, no, we're going to have plenty of content.
No doubt.
And you also
and listen, I don't think we're going to know anything until draft day. Would you agree?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if anything big happens beforehand, obviously that will lead the dominoes. But there could certainly be mystery until that pick is turned in. We don't know for sure.
Well, John Dorsey, he didn't tell anybody until like a couple minutes before the draft. He didn't even tell people in the building he didn't trust that they were taking Mayfield.
Right. No, I could see that. I mean, it's so hard to know exactly what's going to happen, and you have so many people prognosticating on what's going to happen, and nobody knows. I mean, you hear everybody who's
it's not a done deal?
Different sources.
It's a done deal
talking to different people and who heard from who, and it's like this big game of telephone.
I don't think a lot of it is prognosticating because I woke up this morning and, like MJ said, it was a done deal, and then like within 5 minutes, it wasn't a done deal, and it's like, look, they've had one 15-minute conversation with whomever they're considering at number one. There has not been a pro day. There has not been a visit here to the facility. Maybe there's someone out in front, a leader, if you will, in the clubhouse, but to say, hey, this is who we're selecting when they haven't even set their 120 board, I think is just amazing to me.
I think the way the scouting combine is set up in Indianapolis, you have this great conversion of all these media types, all these GMs, all these front office people, and there's a lot of relationships between people, and the conversations get going, and eventually people just come to this consensus. I totally agree. I don't think anything is set. I don't think maybe the Cardinals don't even know what they want to do yet because, like you said, they're still evaluating, and they know they have almost 2 months until the draft, and they're trying to figure everything out. Any reports right now, I think people are hoping and trying to guess and trying to break this huge story, but it would be a shock to me if the Cardinals knew what they were doing.
They don't. I mean, I mean, based on what I'm hearing, I mean, it's wide open. I mean, they're open for business. They're willing to listen. They could trade down. Who knows? I mean, it's still a fluid situation. They're leaving the combine today. They scouted over 300 players, 250 to 300 players. I mean, literally. They get back here, and they go. I mean, they've already had their free agent grades. Free agency starts next week, so to say it's a done deal and Cliff's told somebody, that is nonsense.
And you don't know what kind of offers you get. I mean, if the Raiders come and say, hey, we'll give you 4, 24, and 27 for the number one pick, that could change your thinking a whole lot because now you've got 3 first-round picks.
You did a great job in Indianapolis kind of setting the stage on where this has all gone from once Murray got Wade and how tall he became and the conundrum that this team faces. And at that time, there were 55 days left before the NFL draft. We're now inside of that now. But as far as where you were personally before Indianapolis versus where you are now, where you think, I've said you've got the common sense approach to this debate on whether it's Kyler Murray versus Nick Bosa or some other defensive player.
Yeah, and like in the story, I just kind of wanted to lay out the options and what it looks like. And like you're saying, okay, in a vacuum, do you prefer Kyler Murray over Josh Rosen? That's fine. People can have that opinion. There's no right or wrong answer there until we see 10 years from now who's the better quarterback. But just knowing that if you do trade Josh Rosen, you gave up a 3rd and a 5th round pick last year to move up for him. It's going to cost you some dead cap. It's going to be $8 million accelerated onto your cap. So there's other things you have to figure into this. It's not like I want this guy or I want this guy. I think there's a lot more factors. And to me, yeah, it's a big risk if obviously you move on from Josh Rosen after 1 year. I don't think any general manager would do that lightly. It's a really tough call. In the beginning, when all these rumors started, I thought it'd be pretty tough to do because what you invested in him and how much it would cost. At this point, you hear all the rumors swirling, and is there more validity to it? I really don't know because it is such lying season, as they call it. I don't know if it's a smokescreen. I don't know if there's real interest. To me, still, I could understand the idea of trading down where you keep Josh Rosen, and if you can trade down or if you want to take Nick Bosa, to me, those ideas would make sense. but I'm also not a scout and I don't know what Kyler Murray can do. So if they feel like he's going to be an all-pro quarterback, then you do the deal. You don't worry about what you give up because you think you have a franchise quarterback who's going to be in multiple Pro Bowls moving forward.
And I think that's the key there, because there are guys a lot smarter than any of us or anyone out there that are watching film, watching tape, and know and can do a better job of projecting. All we see is what Kyler Murray did on Saturdays, and all of a sudden he's a Heisman Trophy winner and he can do this and he can do that. And, I try to picture myself in that decision-making chair. I know it's a Cardinals decision, but if I'm the general manager, it falls on my shoulders. And if I'm Steve Keim, there is too much risk. There are too many holes to fill to where you are going to go take a step back or two to select another franchise quarterback when you supposedly already have one that I'm not comfortable in order to make that move. But that's me, and from afar, and I just think that the risk outweighs the rewards short term, and maybe that's my problem, because I don't see a long-term future or vision here with Kyler Murray, just because there's so many other issues with this team if you want to flip this 3-13 from a year ago.
Yeah, the one thing about Murray in his corner is he's got elite arm talent combined with this crazy speed. So he's got this skill set that is very unique. And, Russell Wilson, he's probably a lot faster than Russell Wilson. Wilson is a bigger guy, which helps him.
A little bit thicker and maybe more durable. And that's why I asked Bruce Arians at the Combine, because in the past, he's been worried about the durability of dual threat quarterbacks. And I said, is that the case with Kyler Murray? He said, if you can't hit him, he's not going to get hurt. So maybe he's fast enough, and maybe he knows how to slide enough from his baseball background that he's not going to get hurt. And that's why it's so intriguing, because he's able to run, and he's got a better arm and more accuracy than a lot of mobile quarterbacks. Yeah, and Mike Vick ran a 4.25. I think Murray's could run a 4.33 at his pro day, and obviously you can't teach speed. It was interesting, though, being there, all three of us. National media.
Oh, yeah, it's
out of control.
It's 90% national people believe that this is what's going to happen, that Kyler Murray is going to be the quarterback of the Arizona Cardinals.
And it's
in 2019.
possible, but it hasn't been decided.
Yeah.
And I can tell you this right now, they're not shopping Josh Rosen. Fact. They're not. They got to make sure. They haven't even set their board yet.
All right, but
That doesn't mean teams can't call.
True. And that's fair, but let's advance this now, because if Murray is the guy, then you don't need a Josh Rosen. And that's the other aspect on this, is like, okay, well, what do you do with Rosen? It makes no sense to keep him on the roster, so you want to see what interest is out there. Now the speculation has come within the last 24, 48 hours. Okay, what's he worth? And I'll be hard-pressed if I'm on the other side and I'm a team and I'm going to give a first-round draft pick based off what I saw in 2018 for Josh Rosen. But to me, that's where it has to start if you're the Arizona Cardinals.
I think if you're later in the first round, and now you're not just talking about the QB needy teams for this season, now you start talking about a lot of these teams that have the older star quarterbacks. Maybe they're taking a look at, hey, we need to make a bridge to the future. And if that happens, then Josh Rosen is in play for a lot more teams, and a late first-round pick makes sense. But, yeah, there's this talk that you're going to get a third-round pick. If you get a third-round pick, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because it's not worth it after what you gave up for
Well,
him.
Peter King, as you mentioned that third-round pick, he quoted Kurt Warner, I would give a 3 for Josh if Rosen was on the trade block. And we just went through and detailed what the Cardinals gave up to get Rosen, and if only you're going to get a third-round pick in return, see, that's where this conversation completely stops for me.
Well, it only takes one team. And
True.
We know the Redskins in the situation with Alex Smith. Now, they got the 15th overall pick. They got the 45th overall pick. I don't think they would give up 1, but I would ask for it. And then you go to 2, and you mentioned New England possibly, whether Daniel Jones, who obviously is a pocket passer, David Cutcliffe, obviously worked with Eli and Peyton Manning. Do the Patriots take him with the last pick in the first round, or they try to get out of there and get more picks? So it'd be interesting. But the thing is, though, if this does come to fruition, it's more hypothetical right now, that because of Josh's contract, it's very affordable.
Oh, yeah.
Until he gets to that 5th-year option.
Yeah. I mean, if you believe in Josh Rosen.
And you're going back to 1 year ago.
Right. then it's certainly feasible that a team, I think, would give up a late first-round pick if they think he was in a very tough situation with a change in coordinators, offensive line that was, wrecked by injuries, and they weren't very effective when they were healthy. So there's plenty of reason for others to believe in Josh Rosen, which is also the reason why the Cardinals can still believe in Josh Rosen and why we don't think this is a done deal, as people say, because Josh Rosen still has potential, and like you said, all the other holes where you can fill a lot more holes either by taking a Bosa or by trading down and stockpiling picks.
Yeah, I'm all for moving down to number 4, and if I can convince the Raiders to give me 24 and 27, then that's the other aspect of this. And yeah, you're committed to Josh Rosen. Yeah, I'm okay with Nick Bosa not being in my uniform, but the other thing is if you do draft Kyler Murray, or if the Raiders move up and now Bosa drops to number 2, you're going to face Nick Bosa twice with regards to the San Francisco 49ers. And
they've been drafting line, DeForest Buckner, Eric Armstead, Solomon Thomas, he hasn't panned out. They drafted Reuben Foster, he's no longer on the roster, so they've tried to get that defense going. Now the thing is, if you're Gruden, and I understand that they're dating, it seems like Derek Carr, they're not married to him, even though they're saying all the right things. They try to make it clear. Gruden, you have to get a pass rush. You got to get a wide receiver. I mean, you traded Khalil Mack. I don't see them. I think the reason why they did that, they want to keep all 3 first-round picks. They need players in Oakland.
Well, they're just like the Cardinals. They have so many holes, and yeah, if to your point, why, and again,
they sit at 4, they can get a pass rush.
Long-term view versus, hey, we've got 4, 24, 27, and 35, and now all of a sudden we've got our pass rusher because it's very deep, wide receiver, very deep class for pass catchers, corner. That I'm very
just
curious.
think when you trade Mack and Cooper for first-round picks, you have to address those spots. Now, again, they have cap space. We'll see if there's a market out there for Carr, but they do have interest in Murray.
And the difference to me is Derek Carr is he got the big money. He signed the big contract. So you're already paying him a lot of money. If you were able to deal him and bring in a Kyler Murray, if you liked him, you've got that great deal where you're on the rookie deal.
That's a good point.
And you're going to have a lot more cap room moving forward.
And they're probably not ready to compete right away in that division with Kansas City and San Diego, and we'll see what happens with Denver with Flacco.
Yeah, and obviously it's a new coach and a new GM who
got time. He's got a 10-year contract.
Yeah, and they didn't draft Carr, so do they want to stay with him? Do they want to go younger?
It's a great point.
It's the same thing where all this stuff is so fascinating, and that's kind of what I wrote in my story is once we get to the draft, we're going to look back and say, that's why that happened and stuff. But it's so fluid right now that we have no idea how it's going to topple down. And the fact that people think that they know what's going to happen, I just don't believe it. I think there's way too many options, and a team could call and bowl you over, or something could happen where you didn't like something about Kyler Murray's game, or Nick Bosa jumped off the page and you wanted to get the next Khalil Mack in there. There's so many scenarios.
Well, and we're going to talk about this too with you, is because you've done a great job on azcardinals.com when it comes to your free agent primer, and I recommend bookmark azcardinals.com. We got all the Cardinals listed as free agents. We'll give you the tracker. Before you get into that, though, free agent starts next week.
Right.
So some of these teams, if they look at a certain position, they're going to go, well, we can get that in the draft. We'll get an idea what teams are doing in free agency and we talked about the Cardinals doubling up not only in free agency and the draft, but we should have a little bit better idea based on who they sign and what becomes priorities when we not only the first round but the entire draft.
Yeah, I mean, it could be some clues. And like you said, it depends because Steve Keim does like to try to get good players in every spot so you don't have to draft for need as much.
Correct.
When the draft comes around. But there are some points where if you think you can get a great pass rusher early, then you don't have to pay somebody $20 million in free agency, and you can save all that money. So it does go hand in hand, and maybe we'll be able to figure out some things from
some
free
positions,
agency.
but I don't think all of them.
Sure.
Because obviously when you get the first pick, like they have in each round up until the compensatory picks, you'll be able to tell. But I think they're going to double up at a lot of different positions, whether it's free agency, trades or the draft.
Yeah, free agency begins next week. Next Monday at 2 p.m., the so-called legal tampering is allowed, and then the new league year begins on Wednesday at 2 p.m. That's when free agency is official. Teams can announce official signings. Teams can announce officially trades, i.e. Joe Flacco, which has been on the board for a number of days now. But with regards to free agency, and MJ brought it up, Kyle, that's the other reason we wanted to talk to you here on Cards Cover 2 is your free agency primer. First one is out, and that's dealing with the wide receivers. You also got one on linebackers and offensive linemen. We'll talk about all of these throughout these next couple of days here. But there are two things when I was on the other side that I always made sure to bookmark or at least print off, and that was Darren's roster recap as far as breaking down free agents, exclusive free agents, unrestricted free agents, and then what you've done now for a number of years, and that is needs, and then who's on the roster, and then analysis on these 10 position groups. And, of course, wide receiver, we know, is a very high need for the Cardinals.
Yeah, we try to break it down by position because people know in general that wide receiver is a need, but to see who's under contract, who's unrestricted, and then who's a restricted free agent just gives everybody an idea, and then also who's out there, like you said. And I think we all realize that beyond Christian Kirk and Larry Fitzgerald, the Cardinals need wide receivers, and Steve Keim has said it multiple times that we need more playmakers on offense. The problem with this wide receiver group is there isn't a lot of elite talent at the top. There's not an Odell Beckham or a Julio Jones that you would be willing to throw money at. So it's a risk. Do you spend big money on these second-tier guys and also knowing that you saw at the combine these crazy numbers all these receivers were putting up testing-wise. So would you rather wait till the draft and maybe that number 33 overall or your third-round pick, take somebody and hope they pan out? But a lot of that stuff is also fluid. How much does this guy want? And if it's a good deal, I think they go after a receiver. But if not, knowing that it's a pretty deep wide receiver class in the draft.
Two of our colleagues, Paul Calvisi and Darren Urban, took this wide receiver free agency primer even further when they sat down to discuss free agency with regard to what the Cardinals may or may not do.
All right, taking it one position group at a time. Let's start with the position group, Darren Urban, Paul Calvisi, that Steve Keim identified as the biggest need when asked about the offense. And he said, playmakers. There's Larry Fitzgerald, there's Christian Kirk. Obviously, you have David Johnson. But when it comes to catching the ball, we know the Cardinals want to throw it. The question is, who else is going to catch it in 2019?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question, and I think it's one of the number one things this team has to figure out. It's good that Steve Keim is talking about it because I don't think there's any question when you start looking at the wide receiver core, it's something that needs to be addressed. I mean, this is a group that just a couple of years ago was a major strength of this team. Now you're to the point where beyond Larry Fitzgerald and Christian Kirk, there are a lot of question marks. I mean, only J.J. Nelson is an unrestricted free agent and could possibly leave, but what you have left, with all due respect to the Chad Williams and the Trent Sherfields of the world, are these guys that can take you to the next level? And I don't think there's any question they're going to have to look at that.
It's hard to believe J.J. Nelson had 7 catches all of last year. I mean, there are a lot of question marks. And to me, when you look at the recent track record or lack thereof of draft picks of rookie receivers making an immediate impact, now Christian Kirk did a pretty good job, but really he's been the exception the last 5 years. It makes sense to me to target an experienced free agent receiver or two. I'll throw out a couple of names. How about Golden Tate? Cardinals very familiar with him from the Seattle days. Randall Cobb, Green Bay, connections to David Rye, the receivers coach, and Tom Clements, the new passing game coordinator.
Well, I don't disagree with you from the concept of that a rookie receiver is going to take longer to get in there and maybe make a difference, and I like the idea of getting a veteran. You have to kind of see where this goes. You mentioned those two guys. You could make the argument that Randall Cobb in free agency might be the second best free agent out there, or Devin Funchess, or these guys who in themselves, where they are in their careers, probably wouldn't really jump on the radar all that high given where they are at this point and their production. Yet these are the guys that you're looking to pick at. You know, Golden Tate is probably going to be the number one receiver out there. I'm guessing there's going to be more than one team looking for him. It might cost a pretty penny, and you got to kind of work that cost-benefit ratio.
If you're looking for that speed guy, sort of that Tyreek Hill, and everybody is, what about a Tavon Austin? What about a Tavon Austin, this Cliff Kingsbury offense that jet sweep guy, the guy who can provide the misdirection, sort of the eye candy for the defense. I think that's a guy. If you're not going to keep J.J. Nelson, you need that elite speed, I think.
I don't disagree with you. Again, Tavon Austin is somebody who hasn't been able to really find his way in this league, and you have to figure out, is it because if he was in a scheme like this it would work better, or if it's just that's kind of who the player he's going to be.
All right, March 13th is when free agency begins, the league year at least. We'll see what the Cardinals have in mind.
Randall Cobb, certainly an interesting name because, as Paul and Darren brought up, the connections to Green Bay, yet you also got to wonder just how much money this wide receiver group is going to command on the open market because the depth at wide receiver in this draft. And then it's not just DK Metcalf, but even down the line, you throw in N'Keal Harry, Riley Ridley, Andy Isabella, who I've mentioned before, just because of what he did at the Senior Bowl. There might be teams that hold off at wide receiver, Kyle, just because do I really want to throw X amount of millions of guaranteed money at a known, but maybe depending on age or injury versus getting someone cheaper with a huge upside.
Especially if teams have 3 guys that they're depending on and feel pretty good about, then you can take a guy in the draft and let them develop. And maybe that does help the Cardinals if it's a soft market and you can get a receiver. To me, it's interesting hearing about Golden Tate and Randall Cobb and guys that are primarily slot receivers when you've got Larry Fitzgerald in the slot. Christian Kirk's best spot still might be in the slot, but I asked Daniel Jeremiah, the NFL Network analyst, about should they look for an outside guy, and he said Cliff Kingsbury just needs playmakers, and he can dial it up to where they can move around, and he wasn't too worried about whether it should be a slot guy or an outside bigger guy, and that could help you where offensively you can do a lot of different things with Cliff Kingsbury. So let's just get a guy that can catch the ball and make guys miss, a la Golden Tate, and then that's just what you do after that.
Yeah, I mean, last year they sniffed on, Jordan Matthews, and he was injured and he IR'd with the Patriots. They signed Bryce Butler. He had the drops. He was bounced around Oakland, Dallas, and Miami. They brought in Greg Little, hoping that maybe they can find diamond in the rough there. But I think they got to get a veteran receiver, but I don't want to overpay.
And that's key.
But you have to bring some veteran guys in here. And, Cole Beasley, another slot guy. We'll see what his market is. But I do think you're going to have a couple slot guys. And Larry's on a 1-year deal. You got Kirk there because everything happens so fast and the bubble screens and everything else. And sometimes those slot guys, they're hard to tackle in the open field because those linebackers, they're so big and they don't have the same speed to get to cover the space. So, but I definitely think you got to bring in a couple veteran wide receivers and maybe a guy that was a 4th or 5th round pick and his contract's expired and he feels like that's what happens here. These guys that were drafted in the first 3 or 4 rounds, usually their teams re-up them or they ID them. The guys that were drafted in the 4th, 5th, 7th rounds, they're all of a sudden, they're a free agent now and they want to get paid. So it could see maybe not a Golden Tate or Randall Cobb, but a guy that is a veteran guy that's waiting for an opportunity, but he has experience, and I think that's important that you try to do that.
And maybe get him a little bit on the cheaper as well, because that'll also help get you some holes to fill on the other side as far as your other holes along both offense and defense. Now, as far as the draft is concerned, and of course Metcalf is the one big name amongst the wide receivers, and he certainly was very impressive in Indianapolis. 1.6% body fat, which I think I was hearing someone say that one that's just not healthy. But certainly
he won't survive in the NFL with that.
And that's something
might not survive at all at 1.6%.
But how fast he is, especially at 228 pounds. He ran a 4.33 40-yard dash, fastest by any player who weighed 225 or more pounds since at least 2003. And it is quite the specimen that DK Metcalf is out of Ole Miss, and just how fast he was, because that opened up a lot of eyes as we were watching this take place in Indianapolis on Friday when the wide receivers took center stage at the Combine. And now what the NFL Network did, as we showed you earlier, but how fast Metcalf is with comparison to a Patrick Peterson, a Jalen Ramsey, or a Richard Sherman. And this simulcast that the NFL Network has done just proves how quick Metcalf is. And specifically when you're talking about Patrick Peterson, we all think he's fast, yet at the same time,
Well, how much do those other guys weigh compared to him?
not as much.
No.
Patrick's not as
No
238.
Patrick's going to want to race him. He's going to hope that they draft him, and he's going to get him out there the first day.
But he's got a good two steps on Patrick Peterson. And, of course, the NFL Network kept replaying that over and over again on Friday. And, by chance, Patrick Peterson was watching the NFL Network and tweeted, quote, "Okay, at NFL Network, enough of that simulcast with at DK Metcalf 14, haha, hashtag NFL Combine." A lot of players were watching the Combine because there were a lot of responses to what these players were doing individually.
Yeah, not just him, but like you said, so many other guys putting up crazy numbers. DK Metcalf is so interesting because his side-to-side numbers were like in one of the lowest percentiles, so great straight line speed, but when it comes to going side to side, he didn't have it. So if you're a wideout, you need to do a lot more than just run down the field. So it's going to be interesting to see who grabs him and what kind of career he has. Obviously, he's got incredible abilities in certain areas, but do the downsides of what he does, is that going to hurt him in the NFL?
I talked to a scout. He called him a one-trick pony. He only can run north and south. He can't cut. He's not a great route runner. Somebody's going to draft him because of his measurables, and we'll see if guys want to tackle him. But he is not polished. He had a neck injury in college. He averaged 18 yards a catch, and you're like, wow. But he only caught like 70 balls in college. So, again, J.J. Nelson, you love speed, and John Brown, and those guys were, maybe John Brown learned to become a better route runner. J.J., we didn't know if he was going to catch it. We were hoping for a pass interference call. But speed kills, but if he's a one-trick pony, when he's in the game, he's not a great route runner. So, again, in fairness to him, I'm sure he's going to continue to work on that stuff. But according to a scout I trust, he said, this guy can only run north and south, so you better be aware that you're going to have to teach him the other stuff.
Those types of guys are so unique, and it's why I have a love-hate relationship with the Combine, because some guys test out of control, and then they're elite football players in the NFL.
Right.
And other guys do this, and if they can't cut and you can't run a good route, Patrick Peterson will be able to shut you down if you can only go north and south. So
and I'm glad you brought that up about his 40 time is off the charts, but the other stuff you would think he'd be better at based on his athleticism and his speed and able to turn his hips.
Yeah, and it's going to be an interesting test case. And if you're a team, do you want to draft him thinking he can get better in those areas? Or I think
he too stiff to do that stuff?
I think his stock went way up in those drills, and then I think it's going to come back down because of his lateral ability.
Now you peel the curtains back a little bit, and again, I think Paul hit on it with Darren. He's right. These first-round picks for receivers, Kelvin Ridley came on, DJ Moore, Christian Kirk last year, but John Ross,
Mike Williams,
he had the neck injury coming out of college. Corey Davis.
Yep.
You just don't see these guys contribute. But if you're going to draft a guy that high, you would think he's a plug-and-play guy, especially if he gets drafted in the first round. Mm-hmm. I don't see him dropping, but we'll wait and see, because I think the first couple of receivers off the board are going to be just because of their 40 times. Speed.
Yeah.
Because you can't teach it. And if you get a big physical guy on the outside that can run that kind, it's an option where now you want to drop that safety, we're going to run the ball. You want to drop the safety late, we're going to all of a sudden start going crossing routes. So but he is a fascinating story.
And I think that's why N'Keal Harry helped himself so much, because he had enough of a 40 time. He didn't put up a time like that, but he was low 4.5s, and I
thought he had a great combine.
And he's got the tape. That's the difference, is he put up crazy numbers in college. He did all that and then showed that there was nothing that is going to hold him back in the NFL.
And he has just as many reps as Metcalf, right?
Yeah.
27 on the bench press.
Yeah, that's impressive. You see cornerbacks and receivers go 17, 18, 19. He had 27. Listen, I knew going in, my projection, I've told you guys this forever, I thought he would run a 4.55 or a 4.58. What'd he run?
Yeah, under that, right? A little bit under.
4.54, I believe, was his best.
Yeah,
that's great for
That's
him.
what I was told all along, and it was going to come down. I thought he had a really good. I was impressed the way he speaks. Obviously he wants to be here with the Cardinals. If he's there at 33, unless they want to move up, I have no issue with that pick.
Yeah, no, I think they'd be happy if he was there to have the option.
Broadcasting here on this Monday afternoon from the Dignity Health Arizona Cardinals Training Center, and doing so in our Bose QC35s. Go to Bose.com for more information. Kyle has been gracious with
giving
his
us
time
overtime
and
today.
Has agreed to stick around for Bird Gang Sound Off, so we're going to double Kyle's pay here on this Monday. Just give him double of what nothing is. It's a really
Check my
great
calculator
deal
there.
here.
Well, he's the guy when it comes to the combine because he gives you a different perspective, and obviously we like his writing. But when it comes to the free agent primer, he's our go-to guy.
Absolutely.
So I think we're going to be
There we go.
spending a lot of time together.
Let's do it.
azcardinals.com for more of those free agent primers. But right now, Bird Gang sounding off here using the hashtag cards cover 2. Hashtag cards cover 2 with the number 2 to get involved on the show. And we'll start with Twitter. User wants to know, given the struggles the Cardinals had stopping the run last season, do you think a solid interior lineman like Quinnen Williams, who we talked about earlier here today, would be the right choice at number 1? And because of the depth at edge rushers, maybe wait in the draft or perhaps free agency?
Go ahead, Kyle. Tackle it.
I think I know the run defense was an issue last year, but when you're talking about picking at number 1, pass rushing is always going to be the premium skill that you want. And the nice thing about Quinnen Williams is he can get after the quarterback from the interior. And that's Daniel Jeremiah did say Bosa and Quinnen Williams were higher on his board because they can stop the run too. So pass rush first, if you can do that, and if you can stop the run too, that's a bonus. So having a guy like Williams up there, I think because he does both so well, that's why he's in the conversation.
If I had a rank, it'd be 1 and 1B. And I'm not talking about Josh Allen. I'm talking about Bosa and Williams. I know one's a premium because of an edge rusher versus inside, but I think they're both quality football players, and I think as long as they can stay healthy, I think they're going to have nice careers.
Bird Gang sounding off now on Instagram. Something else we talked about earlier in the show. We'll address it again for those that might have missed it. If user wants to know, hypothetically, the Cardinals did decide to draft Kyler Murray, what do you think the value is for Josh Rosen as far as picks?
I don't know. I would think that late first, early second range is probably the most realistic, but it's very dependent on what teams are interested, how badly you need to get rid of him, and there's a lot of factors involved, and I don't think it's a third rounder. And if you're talking about top 10, I think that would be tough considering he went 10 and then didn't have a very good rookie season. So somewhere in between there, but I'm not exactly sure on what range it would be.
Yeah, and again, the Cardinals they're not shopping Josh Rosen. I mean, obviously they're doing their due diligence. I'm sure teams are calling, but I think it's like if he goes like New England, can you afford to give up the 32nd pick in the first round, or do you offer their second? If he goes to a team that needs a starter, I think you can get more, like the Washington Redskins. Now they have 15 and 45. I'm sure the Cardinals would ask for 15 hypothetically, but maybe they're going to try to settle on 45. And if you're Belichick and Daniel Jones is there, where he's the prototypical pocket passer under David Cutcliffe, and he's going to sit for a few years, maybe they go that route. But we know if this comes to fruition, or again, more of a hypothetical, Rosen's contract the next couple of years, very economical.
Yeah, if you think he's a franchise guy,
exactly,
and you got a late first-round pick, if it was me, I wouldn't hesitate to trade it.
Last question comes to us from Instagram, and we all focus on first round, but user wants to know, are there any names that you guys have heard at the Combine as possible targets in rounds 2 and 3? So you're talking about day 2 of the draft on Friday.
I don't really know specifically. I think it's just more about the positions of need where you see wide receiver, you see offensive line, you see defensive line, and positions like that. If it matches up on their board and that position, it makes a lot of sense. And let's see what happens in free agency, because that can plug some holes and then your needs change a little bit.
I'll throw in linebacker as well on day 2.
Yeah, but again, once we see what they do in free agency, and again, C.J. Mosley was not franchised. That's a heavy ticket item there. Obviously a plug-and-play guy, but we'll just have to wait and see. But we can throw names out there, but Kyle done a good job just documenting where the needs are, and we all know what they are. Offensive line, wide receiver, maybe add a tight end, even though they got Charles Clay and Ricky Seals-Jones. We'll see what happens with Gresham. And then D-line, linebacker, and to me, best available player when we start to get to the middle round. So you can just base it on their needs, but we got to wait the free agency first, and we'll have other names for you when it comes to rounds 2, 3, and 4, just based on what the projection is.
And you're rebuilding enough at this point where it's completely best player available. back 2-3 years ago when you're pushing for a title, you wanted to maybe plug in some holes a little bit more. Now, if you feel like you're going to be competitive in 2 or 3 years, just take the guy that's the best player and then keep building up your core, get as much talent as possible.
And part of that is knowing that maybe you lose a guy in free agency. My example would be Calais Campbell, okay? They drafted, obviously Robert Nkemdiche to possibly replace him. So when you know you're going to lose a guy in free agency and you don't want to spend big money in free agency, you try to get a guy in place. Now, that didn't pan out, but that's what the idea is. So sometimes I think every draft pick has a little bit of a need, but I agree with you. Measurables, and then best available player kind of trumps that. But I think that a little need is involved sometimes.
Yeah, definitely.
Appreciate the Bird Gang sounding off here on this Monday using the hashtag CardsCover2, hashtag CardsCover2 with the number 2 to get involved in the show. Appreciate everyone reaching out. We'll do it again on Wednesday. Also appreciate Kyle joining us for Bird Gang Sound Off. And again, azcardinals.com for your free agency primer. Already posted wide receiver, linebacker,
linebacker,
and
offensive line,
which was posted earlier today. Yep. And of course, they'll run through this Friday and through the weekend, and then free agency begins next week. Monday and Wednesday are the 2 big days.
It's already here.
Yeah, and that was quick.
And those 3 you put out first, those are all needs.
Yep. Funny how that works.
Oh.
So there was a plan behind it.
Kyle, appreciate you joining us here on Cards Cover 2. And with that, we thank everyone behind the scenes. Before we do that, real quick, reminder, Kingsbury Chronicle podcast tomorrow afternoon, 3 p.m. to see what the head coach thinks about his first experience at the NFL Combine as a head coach. Remember, he did so as a player way back when. But special thanks to those behind the scenes, Tim Delaney, Jim Omahundro, Devin Henry, Jesse Aranda, Jackson Sipes. For Kyle Odegard, Mike Jurecki, I'm Craig Grialou. We'll talk to you on Wednesday here on Cards Cover 2.